What's up everybody, welcome back to a brand new video on Lex Selects. It's a rare video on my channel, but today it's a very important video as this next season, this next championship season happening in under a week now, 5 days time, it is now officially time for me to release my official table predictions. So I've got to put my neck on the line and throw these predictions right at you. And my track record for these table predictions has been alright in the comparison of a lot of the content creators around. But this is definitely going to feel like the year where I'm going to feel most nervous making predictions, because I'm definitely not as educated and clued up as I was, obviously with me working full time and having study as well kind of dominating my life at the moment. I've not really been able to keep too many tabs on all of the teams. But it had been a very interesting insight when I released my early predictions and I saw your reactions to those, and it definitely gave me a good idea of how certain teams were and just how fans were feeling about their season as well. So taking all of that into mind, because I have read every comment from there and just kind of seen the bookies and just seen some glimpses of performances and transfers and how the squads are looking and what's going on behind the scenes, I've compiled a table together. One thing that I'll say before revealing the table, don't take these predictions too seriously. I, for one, know that I'm not going to get every single position correct. It's just my thoughts of all of the teams going into this season. But what I like to do is for you guys to also make your predictions. I would love to see them in the comments down below, and we can compare and contrast and do all of that stuff. Right. Before we move on, please like the video if you've not done so. It really helps grow this channel. Please hit that subscribe button too. That really helps as well. We're getting some decent coverage actually from the previous early predictions. So thank you guys. And please also share the channel too. All these things really do help. But without any further ado, right, it's got to be done. Let's reveal my 23-24 championship table predictions. Starting at the table with the bottom place, 24th place. Unfortunately, Sheffield Wednesday fans, I'm also predicting you to finish in 24th. Now, my only predictions, which I didn't release too long ago, I had them around 20th place. I didn't think that Sheffield Wednesday were going to be spectacular within the season, but I thought they'll be there and thereabouts. But I remember saying that in that video that I was expecting them to get more things done within the period of me releasing that video to now. And in all honesty, they've not done enough. They made a couple of new signings with Valentin coming in for Sporting Gijon, but other than that, it has practically been almost that exact same squad. It's one of the oldest squads in the league, which could work in one or two ways. It could either be, good, with the amount of experience, and there are some championship experienced players, thinking of Barry Bannon, Michael Smith being two great examples of that, Lee Gregory another one. But unfortunately, with that whole squad, I expected more reinvestment. I expected more backing from Chansiri, and Sheffield Wednesday supporters have actually not grown surprised about this now, and have actually grown tired of how Chansiri has handled this whole build up to the season. They've had a type of way of playing football under Darren Moore, where now he's gone. Xisco Munoz comes in, where he has done well in the championship. I will acknowledge how well he did at Watford. And he did walk in with a team playing in a completely different philosophy and did manage to get a tune out of him. But this Sheffield Wednesday team, I don't think he's got the same tools he's had to work with within that Watford squad. I think it's going to be a very tough job for him. If he makes it tick, then Sheffield Wednesday could prove me wrong. And what could also prove me wrong is all of a sudden Chansiri, right in the last minute of the last week of the window, he splashes so many signings. And honestly, with all of these teams, I think what could really throw everything off is if a lot of these teams decide to do some late business, because there are a couple of teams that have used a couple of loans, but not as many as I was expecting, especially from the championship. So I think a lot of teams are just operating a little bit more slower this year, and what we could have is that by September time my thoughts could change. But as I'm going with the squads right now, Sheffield Wednesday unfortunately falls into the bottom of the list of teams that I'm confident with. So they are going to fall in 24th place, which is a shame because I want them to survive. 23rd place, I've gone for Rotherham United. And it's a shame that I put Rotherham down, because I really felt that actually them surviving is one of the highlights of last season. For the fact that it broke their curse of yo-yoing between Championship and League One. Matt Taylor has done a fantastic job keeping Rotherham up as well. And they really could have collapsed when Paul Warne decided to leave them for Derby County. So I do think the squad has got the grit, but a lot of players they had let go. One of the most crucial ones, Ogbene, now joining Luton Town, where he scored a lorry load of goals, especially at the start of the season. So I am a little bit worried in terms of where are they really going to get those goals coming from. They don't have, as much fortune as they really have with options this time. I think Dylan Phillips could potentially be a good backup goalkeeper. They have got one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship in Johansson there. Onyedinma as a loan transfer is very, very recent actually, which could be interesting. But they've lost Wes Harding, one of their more competent defenders, to a Championship rival in Millwall. And I think they have lost some key players that I think they really could have used. So unfortunately for me, I think they will go down with a lack of depth and just, unfortunately, lack of quality, in my personal opinion. I would love to be proven wrong because Rotherham do define the odds when they do survive in the Championship, and it'll be nice to see them do it again. 22nd place, which has been a real last minute change for me. I'm actually going for QPR. So what had proven to me last season is that it doesn't matter if you've been in the Championship for nearly 10 years. No one is safe. We've seen that, in another league, in the Premier League, you could be established like Leicester and still get relegated. And for our case last year, Reading would have been very established and, they got relegated. So I think with QPR and with every team, no team is safe. If you are mismanaged in a period of a season, then you're ultimately going to get a ticket to relegation. And I do think QPR could sleepwalk themselves into that realm if they do not get a handle of things. And what I mean by that is that I think there's a clear lack of freedom with the way that the players would like to play. It's a very attacking team, I still think, when you've got Chris Willock and obviously Ilias Chair in your team. But Gareth Ainsworth is not that type of manager. I'd be interested to see if he thinks about trying to change his style, but he has a very rough and ready set piece, direct sort of approach, and it could potentially work, but in my opinion, I don't think it will. And if QPR are going to continue at the form that they had, ending the season, they're not going to start well at all. And the only thing that could save them is, if they do start badly and Ainsworth is gone, they find an inspired managerial appointment, gets the best out of Chair and Willock again, and then suddenly they now start climbing their form again. And what's clear to me is that when the momentum is really dull, it can really, affect them mentally. That's what I've seen. So I do have concerns mentally for this QPR side. They've been battered and bruised, I think, from last season, and I think it could be a quite bad hangover period. I think they'll start pretty poorly, and I feel like that they'll give themselves too much to do. So I'm going to say QPR are actually going to be 22nd place, which will be a real shame. It'll be a London club going down to League One. So coming in at 21st and narrowly surviving the drop, I have gone for Plymouth Argyle. So Plymouth have been a team that I've been naturally swayed a little bit the more that I see them. Now, when I made my early predictions, one of the players I got back was Morgan Whittaker, which already made me excited. But they didn't get Bali Mumba back, and they literally signed him, I think, the day after I made my early predictions. And I thought, that's it, signed, sealed and delivered. They've got the most crucial players back for what they used from last season. I was very surprised that Norwich didn't keep Bali Mumba, but honestly, now that Plymouth got him back and around £1 million as well, that is a bargain on the amount of crucial goals he scored for Plymouth. And he really, I don't think could be the difference, but he really could play an integral part to that Plymouth team. And I think what we're going to see with Plymouth, you would have noticed how strong their home form was last year. I think if I do the maths right, 87% win rate percentage at home, which is insane. You shouldn't be able to be this good at home, but Plymouth they were absolutely incredible. That's how they got over 100 points in League One. Now here, I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. I think the squad, budget-wise, is not as strong as many of the other mid-table teams, and I think naturally Plymouth have got to try and get to that level. But I think if they survive here, which I do think now with the players that they've got back permanently that they used last year, I think now they've got a chance. And if Steven Schumacher decides not to change too much, he continues the way that Plymouth like to go around their way, which is pretty much nicking like a 1-0 win, which, you know, a lot of their results were by the 1 goal. But now they've got Whittaker back, who I know can score goals, and even losing Ennis, Whittaker had an impressive run of form in the early part of the season. So I now am feeling a little bit more confident in Plymouth now, and it would be nice to see them, you know, stay back up within the Championship. Coming in at 20th place in the table, it is Cardiff. So a lot of people have had the same 5 teams around the bottom 5, but I've obviously gone for a slightly different order. Cardiff, I think, will be around 20th place, but they could easily be around, you know, QPR's position. They've got a manager in Errol Bellew, which I really have not, you know, observed. It will be tested for the first time in English football. It could either go very, very well, or it could be absolutely disastrous. And likewise, I think what we will see with QPR and Cardiff, I think both of them are going to change their managers halfway through the season. And it really could be whichever one's quicker to get a more safer and more experienced manager at the helm. You know, one of these 2 teams could end up surviving and one of them could end up going down. I think knows how tiny the margins are really going to be within that bottom 5 for this year. I've edged them a little bit above them because I do like some of the signings that they made. I like the loan signing Karlan Grant. I think he struggled a little bit with West Brom, but I think now with Cardiff, where he will be the number 1 striker, I would imagine, I think he now will have a really good point to prove. I like Aaron Ramsey as a bit of a sentimental signing. He's not too old. I think he's 32. So I still think he can, you know, offer something on the pitch as well. And I think he could be a really good leader. So I am liking Cardiff's signings, and I do think they have enhanced the right areas in their squad. The only doubt I have is within the quality of the manager. But if I knew a bit more, then maybe I could have put Cardiff a little bit higher up. Now, 19th place in the table is Huddersfield. One of my biggest changes, actually, from my early predictions. So I was aware of the little signings that they made. It's a tough one, really, because do you expect Neil Warnock to potentially get this team continuing their playoff hunting form, where at the final couple of games of the season, they really were picking up a lot of points consistently to the point where they could have really been a playoff form team? I don't think it will happen at the full season. It's been one of those teams where naturally the more that I think about it and I see the squad that they've had to deal with, I do think there are some holes in that squad, and there's very little investment going on with the ownership with this club. Major signings would be Maxwell, the goalkeeper that they managed to get in, but they've lost Dwayne Holmes, who wouldn't have been a starter player, but he would have definitely chopped in and been an important squad player. So I do think their squad is not in a better shape than what they were from last season. And Neil Warnock, you know, he's not the youngest of managers anymore, but I know he can still give like the whole hairdryer treatment, and I think he can get a tune out of his squad one way or another. But I do think this squad is just lacking a little bit of care, a little bit of investment. If more investment was in, then I think Neil Warnock would thrive with that and allow this team to improve. But unfortunately, at this moment of time, I'm going to say they're going to be down in around the same place as last year and finish in 19th place. But watch Huddersfield suddenly sign 5 players after this video, and then I'll probably be proven wrong at this rate. 18th place. Now, this period of the table was where I started to struggle, because generally I think from 18th to 7th, I'm really splitting hairs. It's really down to my confidence with all of these teams and how I've ranked them. So, 18th place in the table, and I'm very sorry Ben HD, but it's Preston North End that I'm putting down in 18th place. It is by far their lowest finish in the last 3 or 4 years, at least. It definitely probably actually would have been their lowest finish since getting promoted back to the Championship. Now, the reason is, I think that area of the table this year is probably its most competitive it's ever been. And even stable mid-table teams that we associate Preston to be, if there's not a lot of investment and not a lot of movement there and, you know, forward direction, then what would be a mid-table team performance and finish, it will naturally be starting to be pushed down, since the teams below them are now making more forward-thinking planning and will overtake them with it. And that's what I'm kind of expecting really with Preston, which I really hope doesn't happen, to be honest, because they are a really good club at heart. But in all honesty, in terms of the signings, I'm actually quite excited to see. Frode Jensen from Denmark, actually, I think is quite an interesting one, who managed to get in for about £1 million there. I already spoke about Dwayne Gnomes. Will Keane will add some experience there. Calvin Ramsey from Liverpool will be interesting. But losing Daniel Johnson was definitely one player that I think is going to have a bit of a hole and a void within this team. So overall, I do think their squad is around the same from when it was last year, and they finished in around that mid-table position. But I just honestly think some of the teams below Preston have actually made more enhancements to their squad, have improved their squad more, and they're looking like that they can have more forward momentum going into this season. And I think Preston is just a bit stagnated, and they will just slowly drop down in a way. I don't think they'll have many fears of relegation, but I think definitely if they do not start the season well, because they started the season quite alright actually with how good their defence was, but they were leaking a lot of goals in the second half of the season. So the fact they've not really addressed it, I don't know if I'm really confident with Preston this year. I'm going to go 18th, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. 17th place is their rivals, Blackburn Rovers. So Blackburn, putting them down all the way in 17th, 10 places lower. I'm really not going to be popular with Blackburn fans after this video. I can already visualise the comments, but this is really down to Blackburn by far being in a worse state in their squad than they were from last year. There's no denying that. Even with the signings of Sigurdsson and getting Niall Ellison, you can't replace Ben Brereton Diaz for how important he was in that squad as well. And losing Bradley Dack, I know for a lot of last season he did not feature based on that long-term injury, but he is a very important squad player. There's a lot of quality in that team that was taken from Blackburn. And I think the signings that they brought in are alright signings, but I don't necessarily feel that they are going to offer the same amount as those players did. And I do think if there's a little bit of frustration going around in terms of what's going on behind the scenes, especially with the manager, if the manager leaves, being frustrated, for instance, that's going to really throw things for Blackburn, and they'll have to go through another manager, more transition there. So I think it's going to go through loads of transitions this year, and that is why I think Blackburn's form is going to affect where they finish in the table. So I'm going to go for 17th place. But I really could look back thinking, gosh, what was I thinking about that one? Because it's definitely a bit of a bold pick for me. But I definitely can see it happening if things don't go well on their part either. 16th place, I've gone for Birmingham. A 1 place improvement from last season. So I've actually not expected as much of a jump as I, made in my early predictions. When I did that, I think I was really riding the hype of how Birmingham are really going to set themselves into this season. Now that I've calmed down a bit and have really taken a look in of where their squad is, it's a squad definitely, improving quality within its depth with the signings that they got in. But they have lost a really big part of that team into Heath Chong, where he has joined Luton Town. Now, I do know some of their players do have injury problems. I look at Bielik being a fantastic example of those. So, one thing that we could see with Birmingham, they could have good form, but if a couple of their first team players pick up a long-term injury, it can disrupt the flow and the momentum a little bit. And I do think this club is going on a positive direction. I definitely think the ownership that they got seem committed, that they really want to try and push Birmingham up the table. I'm still a little bit uncertain whether John Eustace has the capability and consistency and tactician-wise to make Birmingham a team that can compete within the top half of the table. So I do think maybe within a couple of years, we'll see Birmingham really starting to creep up into the upper ends of the table. But I think for this year, just establishing everything, establishing all the change, And I think finishing in 16th, would not be a terrible finish for them. But I think some fans, will be dreaming that they could potentially get some major improvement this year. And I don't blame them. Feels like a really, much better time to be a Birmingham now than it has been in the last 5 years or so. Coming up next within the table in 15th place is Swansea. Now, I think that's another very bold pick on my part. And there's a couple of major reasons for it. For one, if they lose Joel Piroe, that is a huge portion of their goals just gone within that. He was so important with the way that Swansea managed to get points on the board. I've not managed to do the maths, but I could imagine that a lot of Swansea's points would have been won by the heroics of Joel Piroe putting the ball in the back of the net. He had a fantastic season for Swansea last year, and I was really pleased to see that, considering the season before, he definitely struggled a little bit to get things going. It just goes to show you, if you back a player, give them one season to adjust, second season, they can definitely show their form again. But Leeds are linked with him, and if Leeds get him in and Swansea lose him and they don't replace him, it definitely could be really, not great for them. And they could definitely regret Swansea leaving Morgan Whittaker go to Plymouth if that very thing does happen, actually. They've lost Ryan Manning as well, a defender playing, first team football. Joe Latibeaudiere, another first team defender. Both gone to championship rivals in Southampton and Coventry, respectively, as well. So Swansea have definitely left a lot of players go, and the major signing I see that they've made is potentially Jerry Yates. I think he could be a very, very interesting signing there. Josh Ginley could also be interesting, but overall, I do think the squad is worse off than it was from last year. They've also got a new manager in Michael Duff, where he does operate on a high intensity game like Russell Martin, but the difference is the intensity comes with the pressing and the very direct style of football. Very, very different type of football that they're going to get. So I think naturally that break of transition is really going to make things difficult for Swansea, and I think they will start quite poorly, actually. But I think eventually around the January time, when Michael Duff will have a January transfer window to get players in, I think then Swansea will start clicking their form, and naturally I think they'll finish in around a lower mid-table 15th place. But I really definitely could be wrong in this one. There's no denying that Swansea are a talented team. 14th place, I've gone for Hull. So, Hull as a team, at this moment in time, this would be Liam Rosenior's first full season as a new manager. I am liking the things he is doing with his Hull City squad, honestly. And I think at this moment in time, I am expecting a little bit more movement within the transfer window, but I think Hull's form was very touch and go within the final part of the season. So you'd think, why have I put them in 14th and, maybe not 18th or maybe even 19th, to be honest. And really at this moment of time, I actually think the whole balance of that squad is actually one of the best that it's been for quite some time, actually. I'm really, really liking the fact they got Liam Delap in. I know at this moment of time that he didn't do too well with Stoke, but I think if he gets a couple of good early goals, I think that could really, really help him as well. They got Vinagre in from Sporting Club de Portugal, which I think is a very interesting signing as well. And in terms of losing players, they've not really lost anyone, so I do think they have improved their squad. And if that squad finished around 15th place last year, why not say a little improvement here and put them in around 14th place? That is where I think Hull could finish. But honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if they fall like a couple of places lower or even higher. I think that region of the table really is the toughest to predict this year. Coming in at 13th place, which is another shock, I think. I think a lot of this table is going to be full of shocks, which, naturally, my biggest mistake is going too safe. I'm going to be a little bit more bold this time. 13th place for me is West Brom. So this is a 4-place drop from last year, and 9th place as well, was really, really poor by their standards. I think maybe a little bit unlucky on Corberan's part. Had they not had their poor start to Steve Bruce, Corberan would have got them into the top 6. But right now, the squad has had so little investment, it is actually quite scary. And they have let a couple of people go. There's real tensions going round with the fan base and the board as well. The outgoings go, Darragh O'Shea is a major loss. Livermore goes, getting a huge amount of experience just taken as well. Carlin Grant going on loan as well. The only addition they've actually made is Sarmiento from Brighton, which is an interesting one to say the least. But other than that, I am really struggling to find enough confidence to say that West Brom are going to finish around 9th or even improve on it, to be honest. You know, if there is still going to be tension within fans and ownership and having this sort of chaos, it's really not going to help West Brom, especially if they start poorly. If they start poorly, then I do think this place is going to be revealed. The only thing that could really let me down a little bit is West Brom start quite well and they build up a good sense of momentum, because the Championship as a whole is a very momentous league. If you build up a good string of momentum, whether that's draws, wins or losses, it defines whatever you do. Wins will take you up, draws will keep you mid-table, and losses will keep you down. So I do think West Brom have the capability of doing that, but in my honest opinion, I think they need to do more for what they've done here for me to have any more confidence. So I'm going to put 13th for West Brom. Let me know what you think in the comments down below for that. We've now made it to the top of the table. 12th place is Stoke City. Now this will be their highest finish since getting relegated from the Premier League. This is going to be Alex Neil's first full season as a manager, and I do back him as a Championship manager. He definitely made Preston punch above their weight when they definitely were around a mid-table team. And I'm thinking with Stoke, he could potentially do the same. Stoke have just traditionally been a team that's just lacked consistency and have been promised to do great things, but then fall short. But at this moment of time, I do believe that Alex Neil is one of the better options you can have for a rebuild job, and he has done major projects with Preston. And I actually like some of the signings they've made. I like Mami from Ferencváros, where they got quite recently for €4 million. Ben Pearson is reunited with Alex Neil, which I think is exciting to say the least. I'm really enjoying the double Wolves loan with Kylian Hoover and Chiquinho. I think those two will offer a lot. Attacking was for Chiquinho and whoever for that defensive role there. Ender Stevens, I think, is a good signing. Michael Rose is interesting as well. I do think they've made good signings. I really, really do. And in terms of major losses, I mean, probably Nick Powell, but he's just too injury prone. And Morgan Fox maybe going to QPR could have been one of their more major losses. But other than that, I actually think this is a stronger Stoke team. And I do think if Alex Neil can operate the way that he does, I think he can definitely get this Stoke side to improve. You've heard it here. I think they'll finish in their highest finish since getting relegated in 12th place. Now, 11th place in the table is Bristol City. So they're kind of around, you know, in that region of those teams where at this point, it really, all of them could have been swapped around by like 2-3 places, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And with Bristol City, I am seeing a slow climb. Now, Bristol City, I do remember, I actually think I put them down 19th in my early predictions. And it was definitely one of two most unpopular predictions within that video. And I do admit, I think part of it is me thinking that Nigel Pearson maybe passed it as a manager. That might be quite outrageous for me to say. But thinking about it, if we are going to stretch into his whole tenure, Nigel Pearson is very slowly etching his way up the table with his team. We have seen a small improvement of Bristol City just climbing up the table ever so slightly. And I think he can continue that because I am liking the signings that Bristol City have made. Jason Knight, I think he can actually start within that side as well. Alex Scott, if he leaves, you know, even with that, I do like the replacements that Bristol City have got. McCrory as a defensive midfielder is interesting. Dickey as a centre-back I think will be crucial as well. And Hayden Roberts coming in from Brighton as well. So I am liking the players that Bristol City have gone in. And probably apart from De Silva and maybe Alex Scott coming soon, they've not really lost anyone within their major starting 11. So why not? Let's allow Bristol City a little bit of joy and let them start creeping up into the upper parts of the table, all the way up in 11th place. We've now made it to the top 10. 10th place in my table is Ipswich Town. This one definitely for me had a lot of change. I've definitely had them as low down as 16th, 17th, which is where I would have put them in my early predictions. But then the more that I'm seeing with the signings that they made, I can definitely see that they have got a good sense of confidence and preparation for this season. And even the board that they've got, Mark Ashton, with his previous work at Bristol City, he knows the right approach to make a stable championship team. And clearly their plan is working. They've had some terrific results in their friendlies, but I'm not going to look into that. You know, if I were to base the results in their friendlies, they'll be the best team in the championship, which is definitely not the case. But what I will say, I do think getting some big players back, for instance George Hurst, crucial, because he was so important attacking wise for that Ipswich side, especially in the second half of the season. And I like the ingoings of Jack Taylor from Peterborough. And I like Omari Hutchison as well. I'm really excited for him that he's got a really good and exciting opportunity here. I do think that team has got a lot of experienced heads within the Championship as well. I think Ipswich have just got that perfect balance. I don't think they can build enough momentum to go up into the top 6. It is obviously Kieran McKenna's first time managing in the Championship. A lot of people are raving of his style of football, and more people are actually predicting Ipswich, to finish higher than 10th. But for me, I think 10th place is a realistic, peak of their predictions. I think top 6 is a little bit over the top in my personal opinion. So coming in at 9th place in the table is Watford. So Watford are now in their second year of parachute payments. It's going to be Valérien Ismaël now taking over, and I'm glad that he's actually starting like from when the season has started, and it's not like a manager just thrown in there. But Watford, with the way that they are, they're going to chop and change, aren't they? Ismaël won't last the full season. I don't think he will, unless Watford are the best team in the Championship. We've seen Watford sack managers when they're around second or within the top 6. So, no manager is safe with Watford. Just think that they are going to make some changes across the whole season. And I've not been a big fan of their signings. Jamal Lewis, I don't know, to be honest. Jake Livermore, will be great for experience, but definitely not necessarily the most inspiring defensive midfielder they could have got. And Tom Ince as well, pretty unreliable as well going in front of goal. So I'm not too keen on the signings at this moment. They could announce more signings, obviously. They obviously have lost João Pedro, who was a big part of their team from last season as well. So overall, I do think their squad is slightly worse off than what it was. And if they're going to chop and change managers like they've been doing so much from last year, I think it's going to be a very difficult season for Watford. An improvement, but I think it will still be difficult. And I'm going to predict them in 9th place. Coming in at 8th place in my table, it is Norwich, which is probably a bit of a shock for a couple of you. You probably would have expected me to put Norwich within the top 6. Likewise with Watford, this is their second year of parachute payments right now. And Watford and both Norwich, really cannot afford to make too many mistakes when they've got that financial advantage for the majority of the teams within the Championship. Last season for Norwich was a disaster. They actually started so well. Then all of a sudden they had one terrible result, and then likewise with the QPR affair, they just completely tanked their form and momentum. They changed their manager halfway through. Dean Smith dismisses, and then David Wagner going in. Then you get a good period for a little bit from there. And then again, their end of the season was very, very poor. And David Wagner's still in charge of that Norwich team. And in terms of the signings that Norwich have made, I am not too sure how I feel like with the majority of them. I mean, there's a couple that I think are okay. I think Ashley Barnes could be okay, but I don't think he's going to put the same amount of goals as Timo Pukki did. And what showed for me with this Norwich side, it was a team that I think kind of went past its sell-by date, sadly. And they're going to have to go for some newer players, like Fasnacht that they got, from Young Boys. He being a new player would make things a little bit interesting there. But the rest of the signings that they made, I think, are pretty safe. And quite honestly, I'm not thrilled with the transfer window that Norwich have made. It doesn't excite me as much, and I do still think there are some issues within that side, especially with the amount of goals that they could score, and even at the back as well, they were quite poor. So I'm going to go for an 8th place finish, which is an improvement, likewise with Watford from last year, but it's not enough for me to put them into the top 6. 7th place in the table for me is Millwall. I think they'll have a 1 place improvement from last season, but I think again will narrowly miss out on the top 6. I mean, Joel Berylson, rest in peace to you. Fantastic owner that really made Millwall punch above their weight and to keep them stable. He has done so much for that club. And Millwall still, in his name, just making some fantastic and clever moves. They've not made many moves, but 4 signings, which I'm actually quite a big fan of. Casper de North in the Belgium League, Kevin Nisbet and Hibernian definitely have scored a lot of goals in Scotland last year. Joe Bryan from Fulham, championship experienced defender, and Wes Harding, a safe defender to rely upon. And even with the outgoings, Malone potentially being the only first teamer that would really affect it, I actually think Millwall squad is better. Now, it will definitely go downhill for me if they lose Zion Fleming. Zion Fleming was so important in that team last season. He has been linked with a couple of clubs. So if they lose Fleming, maybe I would be tempted to push Millwall down for a bit, but they've still got him. And if he is going to be at Millwall for another season, I think Millwall can improve on their place. But for me, not just quite enough to get them into the top 6, sadly, which is a shame. So now we made it to the top 6. So a lot of these predictions, I've got the same 6 teams within that top 6. So I'll be interested to see how you think of this order. Because 6th place may be shocking, but I'm gone for Middlesbrough. I think, and this is me just being a bit honest, I think people are getting a little bit overexcited with Middlesbrough again. We've got to remember that Middlesbrough had one fantastic run of form, and then when the pressure came, they mounted their momentum, and then ultimately they tanked. They still did enough, obviously because of their long period of their long run, they got into the top 6, but then they lost out to Coventry within the playoffs, where it was in their hands. They lost that playoff game at their home ground. But the reason why I got them falling down is I think the team's worse off than what it was from last year. They've not really shown too many loan transfers as of yet. The one signing I am a big fan of is the fact that they've addressed the goalkeeper situation by getting Seny Dieng in, who I actually think is a decent keeper at this level. But they've not made any loan signings yet, potentially because of the fee of getting the likes of Cameron Archer and Jacob Ramsey from last year. But I do think the squad is not in as strong of a place as it was from last season. I do think it's going to be a bit tough for character. See if he can use his potential to get the best out of that squad again. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, in my opinion. But I do think with the quality they've got, and if Akpom could score the same amount of goals he did last year, he by himself, I think, would take Middlesbrough in that top 6. But I do think they actually could have finished 6th. Maybe a bit of a shocker there, because a couple of people are predicting them to finish 2nd place. Personally, I don't see it, in my opinion. 5th place in the table for me is Coventry. I actually think they will stay in the exact same place. Now, quite a few people are thinking Coventry could drop down the table because they've lost Vitor Gyökeres, going to Sporting Club de Portugal. But the way that Coventry have used the money they managed to raise from Gyökeres was genius. They addressed all areas of the pitch, including goalkeeper, defender, and they managed to get a striker in as well. And I do think their squad has actually improved a bit with their depth. I like the addition of Brad Collins. I think that's an upgrade on their goalkeeper. I do like Joel Latibeaudiere. He played so many minutes in Russell Martin's team, a team where, you would have needed great passing accuracy with the style of football he'd been playing as well. And Mark Robbins would absolutely love that. And Ellis Sims, potentially the one wild card in those 3 transfers in a way. Because within a main championship striker, we've not really seen him do it, We've not actually saw Sims in general be given too many opportunities. We saw glimpses of it when he was with Sunderland, of course. Then obviously he went back to Everton and actually scored a couple of Premier League goals and actually made a couple of appearances there. So I do think it's going to be a bit of a brave move for Coventry, but it could be a move that they could really bargain from it. So for me, I do think Coventry will stay around the same place despite losing Gyökeres. The only thing that could really let them down is if they let Gustavo Hamer go. He's still a Coventry player, but he has been linked with a load of clubs, so I'm going to keep my eye on that. 4th place is Sunderland. So this is a big change in terms of my early predictions. So I was saying 2 teams were very unpopular with my positioning. Bristol City and Sunderland were the two teams. Both, fans have claimed that I placed them too low. And I think the thing is with Sunderland, I think very similar to Bristol City, I just wasn't sure if Tony Mowbray had the ability to do the same thing he did again. And I think one thing that I need to think about is that Sunderland got into the top 6 in a highly competitive championship season with so many players playing out of position because of injuries. So it tells me that this Sunderland squad have got the grit to handle any difficult situation. And I do think what is really going to help as well, because they had a fantastic away record. So it's clear to me that Tony Mowbray really knows how to set up a team away from him. And I do remember actually talking about that when he was previously in Blackburn as well. He seems to have a really good knack for away games. And for Sunderland's home games, wasn't as strong as their away form. But even with the stadium and the fan base that they've got, it's going to make things very intimidating. Sunderland have got all the assets that they can use to potentially get them right up into the top 6 again. If they lose Ross Stewart, I think it'll make things a little bit interesting. They've already lost a couple of their loan players that they used last year, Amad Diallo being the main example of that. But if we're counting with some of the players that they got in, I think Silt from PSV is interesting. Joe Bellingham, obviously the younger brother of Jude, I think is an interesting move as well. A very young orientated squad, and getting Bradley Dack in, I actually think is quite a good signing. Obviously, Dack reuniting with his former boss. So I'm liking the signings that they got. In terms of losses, I've already talked about what they've lost, but I still think the squad is around the same quality that it was. And if that squad got themselves into the top 6 with that quality, they'll definitely be within that again. But I foresee that these players are going to benefit already being in the top 6. I think they would have gained some valuable experience from this season with it being a very young squad. And I don't think they're going to be anywhere near having as many injury problems as they had from last season either. So overall, I do think Sunderland are going to improve actually. So yeah, we now made it to the top 3. And if you've done the calculations, it is the 3 relegated Premier League teams. I'm sorry, I really want to give a parachute payment a team a chance. But I've got to be honest. I think these 3 teams, are one of the 3 of the best teams that we've seen for quite some time. It was quite rare that we saw 2 recently relegated teams, fall within the bottom half of the table. I don't think we'll see that this year. Third place for me is Leeds, because Leeds are box office when it comes to promotions and stuff like that. But I definitely won't make it easy for them. I think they've actually started to play quite well within their pre-season. And they've really slowly, but have now started to go around their way to get more players in. Ethan Ampadu was their first signing. They managed to sign Carl Darlow very recently as a goalkeeper too. So I'm pleased that they're addressing their defence, because that was by far their biggest issue from last season. They have actually kept a lot of that squad that they used in the Premier League. Obviously, some of the major ones going, Rodrigo being a good example of those, and Robin Koch would have left as well. But still, a lot of these players who would have played in the Championship still there within this squad. And I do think it is a really good team packed for the quality. And Daniel Farke has won the Championship before. He knows how to approach the season. I just think in general, with the whole mentality of Leeds, I think they'll just fall short with the competitiveness of Southampton and Leicester. Speaking of, Southampton is the team that I've got in second place. Now, if they do keep their current squad that they've got currently going into the season, it's stacked full of quality I couldn't even explain. The fact they've still got Ward-Prowse and Lavia is insane. I think at least one will go. At likelihood, both are going to go at some point. If not, summer, they'll go January for sure. But the fact that Southampton have been able to keep them in, I think will be brilliant. The only doubt for me is Russell Martin, to be honest, because it is a very specific way he wants to play. And if Southampton do not have the ability for it, they really could struggle with it. But if he has the right tools, Martin, and has the right players to implement it, then I think this type of football can get a team to win the Championship, or at least get promoted from it. And I do think Martin has got better and more resources to work with. So overall, I think Southampton are going to finish second. And first place for me is going to be Leicester. Very predictable. Everyone I've seen, or majority of people I've seen at least, have predicted Leicester to be first and go straight back up. And there's the comparison that a lot of people like to make with the amount of money they managed to raise from their relegation, losing the likes of Maddison and Harvey Barnes and all of that stuff. It's giving people similar vibes to Newcastle when they were relegated from the Premier League. And I see that. I do see that within this Leicester side, considering they were not even like fighting relegation in the past 3 or 4 seasons before they eventually did get relegated. So showing the strange brutality of the Premier League there. And honestly, with the ingoings of Winks, Cody, they've sorted out their goalkeeper situation as well. I'm liking what they're doing. Now, the only sticking point, again, likewise with Southampton, is the manager. I don't know how Enzo Maresca is going to be within English football. He's only had one managerial stint at Parma, which he didn't do so well with. But we have seen before, if you're working with the best manager in the world in Pep Guardiola, you can go out of your way and create the best version of your own identity with influences of his style. We've seen that with Mikel Arteta with Arsenal. And I think Maresca has got options to work with here. So I think overall, I think Leicester, with the options that they got, they have the best team in the league for me. And that is why I think they'll win the championship. So on the left hand side of the screen is my championship predictions for the 23-24 season. As I said, don't take these predictions too seriously because I am not expecting them, most of them to be right. But I want you guys to also comment your predictions in the comments down below as well, because that's the fun part of the season where we can look back and see how right or wrong we were. So that'll wrap it up for today. A longer video for you guys. If you guys enjoyed, please smash the like button. It really helps. Please hit the subscribe button if you've not done so. It really helps. And please share too. All these things really do help the growth of this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys, the Legend Jay for joining in this video. And as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.